I need to be alone.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're talking about grief, the process of grief. I want to turn your attention now to a related topic, and that topic is how to keep the family together during the grieving process. We're talking about how it's different for people, and you, in addition to Matt and Lacey, you have 2 other children who also suffered loss as you have suffered loss. Of course, they suffered the loss of their brother and sister. So how does a family get through that first week, the first month, after the death of a loved one? How do you keep together?
I think something he shared that's important is to allow each other to cry. You know, for the kids to realize it's okay to cry, it's okay to talk about, and they lost their father and their sister and their brother, and you know, to realize that today this one's having a bad day and this one needs the extra love and care, and another day this one could be having a bad day, and sometimes all at once. You know, it might be a day that I'm having a horrible day, that one of them's having a great day. It really is it's like juggling all these balls in the air, and it's a very difficult time. Many times it involves getting a counselor, and you can watch your kids and tell that, you know, this one's really struggling and may need to get professional help.
Right.
So you really need to be aware of who's, you know, at what place. And I remember it was so sweet. My 6-year-old, when he lost his father, he missed him so desperately, and he slept in my bed for months, and he would go to sleep at night throwing kisses to heaven to his dad. You know, it was very sweet, but it was his way of just remembering.
Yes.
And so everybody is, just like we're so different, the kids are completely different in how they deal with everything.
Yeah, if I could just add, I wouldn't be afraid, you know, in a family to ask for counseling, and maybe to go to a pastor or to go to a professional, and, you know, just talk through and just try to keep an account of where you are. People go through different phases, and I think that it's really healthy to try to help everybody through that process and not to get stuck in the process of grief.
And I would imagine that there are days when one child is feeling really good and wants to go out and play, but may feel guilty for feeling good, right? Because he sees that mom's sad or dad is sad. How do you encourage them to continue on with life in that sense and not be guilty about the others?
Well, you probably need to be with them in it, you know, go with them and do whatever it is they want to do so they can see that it's okay to move forward. It's just going to be hard. However it is, it's hard. Yeah.
But many people try to ignore it or don't make explicit what is implicit, right? You can observe something and then just not say anything, as opposed to really entering in and processing. Do you find it helpful to process verbally with your
absolutely,
kids?
because I'm a talker, and I want people to talk to me. So yeah, that's a good thing, to get them talking, get them remembering, allow them to talk about the brother or sister they lost. You know, encourage them to do things to remember them, whether it's to make or do something in their memory or in their honor. So that helps them to process. I remember when Lacey was dying in the hospital staff came in and had all her friends come in, and already before she was gone, they were making special things all about Lacey. They were making these little collages.
Memories.
Yeah, little memories they had with her, and they all made these little collages. It gave them something to do while they were already grieving, knowing how desperately sick she was. And so that's something you can do with your kids at home, you know, is to help them to make things that help them remember the one that they lost.
Asking questions and not being afraid to ask questions.
What kind of questions?
Well, you know, just maybe something as simple as, you know, how are you doing today? And, you know, what do you think, you know, is it better today than it was yesterday? You know, those kinds of things. But at least...
are you missing your brother?
Sure.
That's a very good question.
Yeah. What do you what do you miss about Lacey?
Yeah.
Those kind of questions.
That's a good question.
It may be that you even get more specific and say, you know, what do you remember as one of the best things that ever happened, you know, with Lace or with Matt, and you know, just asking something specific and talking it out. Let them talk, but a lot of it is just listening. just listening.
So there are, as you're saying, there are really helpful things to say as a family to each other. And I would imagine that people outside your family have said some things to you that they were trying to be helpful, but it wasn't helpful. Maybe came across as insensitive to you or the kids. Talk about what kinds of things have been said that are not helpful, how it's affected you, and then we need some coaching. Like, how should we handle someone who's lost a loved one?
First thing, I know even at the funeral, when people come up and hug you and shake, so many people say this classic phrase, they're in a better place. Well, what's wrong with this place? You know, I mean, I know heaven's a wonderful place, but you're right then, devastated, you're missing your child, and that's not really, somebody doesn't want to hear they're in a better place. You know, just say, I love you, I'm praying for you, you know, I loved your child, and let me, you know, let me write you some memories about you, I'm going to email you some things I remember about your daughter or your son. To say to someone who's a few months or weeks, whatever, into their grief, even years into their grief, do you still miss her? You know, you still miss her?
Yeah.
You know, what if your child was gone? Would you know? Would
you
you
still miss? Your child? Yeah,
and so that and those things hurt. But I look back at when I hadn't lost anyone, and I think, you know what? I stayed away from people who lost children or who lost a spouse because I had no clue. So I love that. You know, we can tell people, please, you know, be there and, you know, say the right thing. You know, find out how they're feeling about this and how they're really doing today, and really talk about their child to them. Tell them what you loved about them, what you remember. That's what we want to hear. So even though that, if I came to you and said something about Lacey, and you might start crying. That's a great thing. That's a great thing, but for the unschooled person, for the person who's trying to not cause pain, uh-oh, I did the wrong thing. And you're saying, no, that's not the wrong thing. Yep, they're hearing it today. That's the right thing to do. We need to cry. Yeah, we really need to cry. And process and talk about Lacey or Matt. Or exactly. Dick, did you want to add something?
Well, I just want to say that, you know, a statistic that's really surprising and it's horrible is that what we've heard is that about 85% of families that lose children, the husbands and wife end up in divorce. And that's pretty tragic. And I think what that indicates is that there is a very serious lack of communication and perhaps even a lack of understanding as to, you know, how we grieve, the differences in the way that we grieve, and not a really healthy type of grief. So, you know, I would caution people about that. And what about this idea of trying to push people through grief, trying to get them over, you know, by this time you shouldn't be so sad, or I really like to see you be in a better place. How detrimental is that? Well, it's very hurtful for people to have an expectation of how long grieving should take, because it really takes as long as it takes, and it's totally different for every person. So let me stop you there. It takes as long as it takes. Now, that's a very vague statement, and it's a very definite statement, right? What do you mean it takes as long as it takes? It definitely is. It's vague on purpose, because for me, I could be really struggling, and say 4 years later, I'm doing really a lot better. But one of my friends might be doing really, really better at 3 years. It's totally different for every person, and every loss is so completely different. I think probably suicide is one of the worst, probably because there's usually guilt associated, so it must take longer because it's complicated. You know, it's much more complicated. Nobody was at fault. Our kids died because of brain tumors. Sometimes somebody accidentally runs over their brother or sister. That's really complicated. So, and it's going to take a lot more to deal with all the issues. A lot of times it's just not over, in the sense that there may be court cases, there may be investigations. Oh yes, and it just goes on, and people have really difficulty, along with grief, to bring closure to this thing, and sometimes that's very extended. Talk about some of the organizations that you have found to be helpful for you as well as your family. I know you've participated in Grief Share as well as Umbrella Ministries.
Yeah, Grief Share was really critical, I think, in helping us survive.
So what is Grief
first
Share?
year. Grief Share is a ministry that's all over the country. You go to griefshare.org, put in your zip code, and you'll find a group very near you. I've sent people all over the country to these groups. 14-week video series, discussion group. It's all people who've lost a child or a spouse, either one, men and women.
Right.
It was so helpful for us. You sit there and you meet these wonderful people who all know the pain that you're going through. So Grief Share has been an amazing help for us. And also, Umbrella Ministries is umbrellaministries.org, just for moms who've lost kids. And they have yearly conferences in California and in New Jersey. And if you go to that website, you can find out about Umbrella. Really helpful to me. I've gone to 6 conferences now.
And you actually speak at some of these conferences
and
now.
now I actually teach at the conferences.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, Dick, I understand that your parents, was it your parents? No. Parents that went to Grief Share?
My parents.
Your parents.
My
okay.
parents, so the grandparents
Grandparents
can also go to Grief Share.
Right.
Yeah, my dad that did this.
Yeah, Grief Share is for anyone who has a loss.
Yeah,
Okay.
not
So
just a
it may
child,
be, it
spouse.
may be a father,
Or a
mother,
friend.
whatever, friend. Yeah.
Okay. So these are organizations where you have found personally very helpful, very rich for you.
There's
to
another
be
one
there.
too that we should mention. HVMI has a ministry called Basis.
Basis.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it's probably basis.org or hvmi.org. But they minister and they have group connections with families, husbands and wives. Yeah.
Let me just throw out some myths to you, and let me see your reaction to them. Okay, myth: grief should be over in a year.
I'm not sure who made that rule.
Yeah, it's
but,
just simply not true.
Right.
Definitely not true.
Right.
Yeah.
How long should grief take?
As long as it takes.
As long as it takes.
As long as it takes.
Yeah. Grief
Hopefully, it would become less intense in a
over
year.
time.
Over time,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes.
Whatever that time.
Right.
But we can go periods of time and be functioning very well, very normally, what we consider to be normal, and then all of a sudden fall into grief again, and unexpectedly.
Right.
Yeah.
Grief goes through stages to final acceptance.
I think the acceptance is that you finally believe they're gone, because for a long time you every day cannot believe it. Your mind plays tricks on you and you just think,
Right.
she's coming back, he's coming back. I just know they'll be back. But yeah, there is a time when you just realize they really are gone.
Right.
Until heaven.
But I would agree with the phases.
That there are
And
phases.
a lot
yeah.
that
Oh, yeah.
we have read about grief. As a matter of fact, if you Google, list the stages of grief,
Sure.
there are probably multiple links that talk anywhere about 4 stages, 6 stages, 7 stages, or 10 stages of grief, and they name them,
Right.
and they're all real.
Right.
So,
right.
yeah.
So we just have a couple of minutes left. How would you advise people to respond to those who have lost loved ones? Just give us some of your best advice.
Okay. Mine would be, if they've been your friend, stay their friend, stay present with them, remember their child, find out the date that child died and put it on your calendar so every year you remember it. Remember them on Mother's Day, Father's Day.
And when you say remember, you mean send them a card, call them, do something tangible,
Yes.
right? Again, this isn't going to be more painful, this is helpful.
Oh, it is helpful to
Right.
know that they remember your child. Email them a memory. I remember the time your
Right.
son did this, and that makes you just smile.
Yeah.
Somebody remembers.
I would say just connecting, and not, it's not necessarily only a child, but it could be their husband or spouse, and so forth.
Well, it has been a real joy to have you here. Thank you so much for sharing your hearts and your wisdom. We really appreciate it.
Good to be with you.
It's great to have you with us, enjoying our town, and I'll look forward to seeing you in our next time together. God bless you.